Hi, Sula. How you doing? You okay?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Good, good. And obviously, you've got kind of one of the biggest sort of single matches you've had in recent years now coming up over the next weekend at Polaris.
hmm
But before we get onto that, I wanted to talk a little bit about how you sort of found your way here because obviously, I think anyone who's aware of the match will already know that it sort of stems from that Polaris Squads battle. But even further back than that, how did you kind of find your way into Jiu-Jitsu in the first place?
Yeah, good question. I kind of just stumbled into it. I feel like jiu-jitsu kind of found me. I was been just finished high school and I was looking for something to do, and my friends were training, so they got me into it. And then that was back in Australia, which is where I grew up. And then about 9 months after starting training, I moved to London. And my plan was to like take a gap year before university and travel and all that. And I'm still on my gap year 9 years later now. So yeah, I started training. My cousin took me to the Gracie Barra gym in London, and I fell in love with the team there, and I fell in love with training. And I pretty quickly like was living in the gym, teaching there 6 days a week, training 7 days a week, competing every weekend. And I kind of like I didn't make the conscious decision to be a jiu-jitsu person or like an athlete or practitioner. I just kind of remember looking at my life and being like, huh, I guess I'm doing this like all in now. So yeah.
Can I ask then, what was it that brought you to London then from Australia?
So I'm half half. So I was born in England in London, but we moved there when I was about two and a half. And so I kind of always had like the intention to come back to Europe and travel. And I wasn't sure if I would like end up here, but I mean, I thought I was coming for 6 months, but my dad's here, my sister's here. So as soon as I got to London, I was kind of like, oh, okay, this is pretty chill. Like I was, you know, pretty happy here. Um, and I just ended up never like moving back to Australia. So yeah, just that.
Fair enough. And then obviously you've sort of like worked your way up the colored belt ranks now over the last couple of years, and you've been, as you said yourself, competing pretty much every weekend. Like anyone who follows the sort of professional jiu-jitsu circuit in the UK will have seen you over the last few years, sort of like rising your way up to the preliminary card, main card, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So can I ask then, throughout that experience, have you found it difficult in the UK at all? Because obviously the number of competitors overall is a lot smaller than it would be in like the
Yeah.
States. But for women in
Yeah.
particular, it tends to be competing against the same sort of like handful of women each weekend kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I always laugh with Nia because I've been fighting her since she was 13. And we must have fought like, I don't know, we used to fight all the time, and now we're like really good friends. So it's definitely like that. You just end up fighting your friends on over and over again. But I think like it's definitely at a breaking point now where like it's really starting to change, and like I see lots of girls competing at the lower belts in lots of competitions. So I mean, when I was a blue belt competing, like there would be maybe two or three comps in London a year. And the rest would be like in Manchester or Bournemouth or like, so we'd be traveling around the country to do little comps. Whereas now it's like there's like three every weekend in London. So I don't know. I think it's been a really cool time to be in women's jiu-jitsu in the UK because on the one side, yes, there's less of us, but on the other side, because there's less of us, we had a chance to like connect and also have those opportunities given to us because there wasn't that many of us to choose from. So I think there's like pros and cons to both, right?
Well, that's a good point as well when you mention yourself and Nia, your sort of like repeated matches over the years, because I think if you look back on it, when you two were sort of like blue belts and purple belts, there was only really Fionn competing at ADCC. That's pretty much it. Whereas
Yeah.
fast forward to last year and you and Nia are both there together. So I mean,
Yeah.
even though that doesn't seem like a lot, that's literally double the representation for UK women in the space of like what, 4 years, 5 years? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a pretty huge leap, really.
Yeah, yeah. And I think next year we're going to see a massive leap. Like if you looked at even the brackets for like pans, for example, with so many European athletes and so many that are like, I feel like all of us are kind of like on our kind of breakthrough year, if that makes sense. Like there's a lot of us that are like, hey, I'm here, but you haven't really noticed me yet, but now you will. Which is really cool. So I think in the next couple of years, you're going to see a big like breakthrough of European athletes, particularly on the women's front.
Nice, nice. And then obviously you mentioned that kind of like breakthrough moment that I think happens for every athlete at some point in their career. There's usually like a either like a single performance or maybe like a string of two or three of them. And I think for you, sort of globally, that was undoubtedly Polaris Squads, you know, where
Yeah.
you obviously you'd already competed at ADCC to be fair, but like I say, that kind of I think that moment where you took Helena managed to win the decision right at the end, that's kind of really sort of like put you on the map, I think. And when you look back at like the Polaris Squad's experience as a whole, how was that like being the first sort of female squad member or one of the first?
Honestly, the squads was like such a special competition. It was like it was, you know, those moments in time where like you're never gonna forget that moment, and it was just perfect as it was. Like the girls that were in my squad, I loved them to bits. Even the girls in the other squad, like I got to get closer with them and get to know them as well. And I think that's something that's really unique with women's jiu-jitsu. Maybe it happens in men's jiu-jitsu, but I think what we're realizing is we really need to embrace that, like that there's two sides. There's always going to be two sides to women's jiu-jitsu. We're never gonna just be able to be like cold towards our opponents all the time. At least not all of us. That's not how I function. So it's finding this way to like compete against people that you also respect and think are really cool and like actually are friends with as well. So the squads event was really cool because there was a lot of girls that I've like I said, I had Nia, Selma, Ani. We've all fought against each other multiple times. So it was really cool to be able to be on the same team for once and be like, okay, cool. Now we can actually genuinely root for each other. So the whole weekend was incredible, and then the show itself was like one of the best in Polaris history, I think. And seeing all the little girls like being inspired by it as well, because obviously when I was a white belt, I didn't start as a kid, but when I was a white belt starting out, I had like I remember I was like obsessed with Mackenzie Dern, but that was like the only person at that point that actually I had as like an idol. And then I met like Claudia Doval, and I started watching Fion, and I was like, oh, these women are amazing. But I never had like contact with them, or like I never got to see them, and I didn't get to see such a huge variety. Where I think now, like you look at the squads, there's so many different types of women on the squads between the two teams, different personalities, different looks, different vibes. And I think for kids, for girls, for younger belts as well, to be able to see that is like freaking awesome. Like to be able to be like, oh, yeah, there's so much space for me up there at the top. Representation is important, so it's cool.
Nice. No, I think you've hit the nail on the head there as well. That the difference between having like an all female promotion like Enyo or having like an all female card like squads, it really does sort of bring, you know, like you said, like dozens of different competitors together.
Yeah,
Whereas when you've got like a regular Polaris event, there's only two, three matches, maybe half of them on the prelims kind of thing. So it's
yeah,
like it is definitely much sort of easier for younger competitors to like find their idols in that sense, you know?
definitely.
And
Yeah,
then you mentioned a little bit about sort of finding that balance between being friendly and being an opponent.
yeah.
How do you sort of switch that mentality then while you're like warming up?
This is something like actually I was literally talking to my sports psychologist about earlier this morning. Because I was like, how can I balance that like duality, that mode? And he was saying like, you need to see your opponents as like video game characters. So you take away their face, take away their name, and you just have a look at the characteristics. Like, okay, that person has like a 4 out of 10 strength, a 6 out of 10 flexibility, whatever, and just look at the attributes and see how you can play best against their best. And I think that is what it really boils down to. And it's the same with like the difference between training and competing at worlds. Like at the end of the day, you are just doing jiu-jitsu. So and when we're training, it's just a puzzle that we're trying to figure out. And if you have a good training partner and you're good friends with them, like some of my best friends, we have the toughest round because we know that it doesn't matter what happens in the round, we're still going to be friends after. And if we don't push each other 100% in the round, we don't actually get better. So I think there's like an understanding between all of us European girls anyway, where it's like, okay, we have to train together because that's how we're going to get better. But we also understand that like, it's okay to like go for it 100% in competition with each other, because ultimately if you lose to your friends, kind of not as not that bad, because you're like, oh, I'm happy for her as well. And same for the other way. Like if you win against your friend, you know that like she's gonna be disappointed, but also there's gonna be an element of like, no, I'm also proud for you. So I think it's just about like taking away the personality behind the person and just fighting the character behind it.
That's a good way to look at it, to be fair. And when you talk about like meeting your friends or your training partners like in later rounds, in medal rounds, that kind of thing,
Mhm.
do you find that there's ever like a time where maybe it does affect the relationship in the background? Do you know what I mean? Like, do you ever find it difficult to sort of see someone on Monday morning after they've just beaten you on Saturday, kind of thing?
um, for me, it's more in the moment. Like, and I don't know how everyone else deals with it, but for me, whenever I'm competing, I'm usually fighting against myself. So the person that I lost to is not usually the person I fought. It's usually myself. And I think in the moment, it's easy to project that onto the person. But after the heat of the moment goes away, 10 minutes of crying, whatever, then I'm like, okay, cool. It's fine. It is what it is. I lost to myself for whatever reason. Not it's not about them. So I haven't experienced that myself. But maybe I will in the future. We'll see.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, it's a good way to look at it to sort of maintain those relationships as well. And I think that does show when you look at squads because, it's quite funny the fact that the European team, you went out last, you needed the submission to bring the team to victory. Obviously, you got the win by decision, but the team were almost more happy that you won the match rather
Yeah.
than upset that they didn't actually win overall. You know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
quite,
Yeah.
I think it caused a bit of confusion for a lot of people watching because both teams were celebrating like crazy. So it didn't
Definitely.
it didn't really make sense at the time. But like I say, they were all happy just for you to get that win rather than what it
Yeah.
happened to the team. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was like such a special moment because obviously Nia was our team captain and she kind of just like turned to me and was like, all right, you got to go. So I was like, okay, cool. Um, and then when I managed to win or whatever, it was like that full cycle thing of like us competing against each other for all these years. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, you did it. And even though it was my win, it was also everyone's win because I think we felt that way when Margot had her run, when Arne had her run, it was like very much like we know each other, we know each other's struggle because we also have that the same like trajectory and the same career path. So it's very easy to put yourself in each other's shoes when you're in that kind of scenario. So yeah, it was definitely a really cool moment.
And do you find as well that having done like a team grappling event now, is that something that you think you might prefer to, competing as a solo competitor?
I think they're very different. I think I really enjoyed the squads event and I would for sure do more. Um, but there's also risks to squads. Like obviously people create whatever stories they want, but in a squads event, pretty much the only guarantee is that if you do well, you're probably going to lose at some point. Because if, like, do you know what I mean? Unless you're like the last fight and you haven't had a chance to fight anyone and then you win, but the likelihood of you losing at some point is really high. So I don't have a problem with losing. So it's not very high risk for me because I don't mind. But ultimately, it's a very different like approach to like a solo competition where it's like, okay, you can just focus on the exact match you're going to do. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it, and I think that the feelings around it and the nerves around it were totally different and kind of a little bit more of an enjoyable experience than like a solo competition.
And then obviously to talk about your actual win over Helena at the end,
Mhm.
can I ask, because you came into that really like all guns blazing, you were aggressive right from the first few seconds. Was that something that you had in mind? Because, like I say, because you needed the submission win, were you just like, right, I've got to leave it all out there kind of thing and get it done in a minute and a half?
Yeah, I don't know. Like everyone was asking me about this, and I was like, I don't really know because um, I feel like sometimes athletes have like two personas, right? You have like your person that you're speaking to now, and then you have like the fighter. And I definitely switched into that persona that fight. I don't always go into that zone, but when I do, I can't really answer the questions of like, because I don't know what I was thinking. I don't remember. I don't think when you're in that, like when I'm in that sort of flow state or that zone, think, I don't have like, I'm going to do this type of thought. It's more of like a lack of thought and then you're just fully in the moment. So it's a really cool experience. And I think the only thought I had was like, okay, like it was literally just like, okay, well, it's a minute and a half. Like, what, what else? Like, let's just, I don't know. There wasn't like you have to win this. And it wasn't like it was just literally like, okay, let's do it. It was cool.
And then before we talk about the actual like, outcome of the match as well, Can I ask then, because you mentioned like going into the flow state, but not really doing that all the time. Is that
Yeah.
like an intentional thing? Do you try and be more present sometimes, or is it just maybe struggling to get into that mindset sometimes?
Yeah, I think anything that like most of the time, and that's one thing I've been working on massively for the last year, mostly even above like my own skill development has just been like mastering my mental state because I know I perform the best when I'm in that state. And a lot of my jujitsu is already there, but I just can't access it a lot of the time if I'm not in that state. So the things that take me out of that state are like when I put pressure on myself, when I listen to other people's expectations or what they're saying, when I'm thinking about like basically anything that's outside of me or in my head, like thoughts and stuff, that's when I start to lose that state. So if I'm focused on the win, or if I'm focused on the crowd, or if I'm focused on what it would look like if I lose, or if I focus on like literally anything apart from just my feet on the floor in that exact moment, that's when I start to go out of the flow zone. So it's something I think all athletes struggle with, like monitoring, because it's hard to get into, but it's also easy to get into. So it makes it even harder because it's so simple. It's like a weird one.
Yeah, no, I definitely get what you mean. Like sometimes you can just sort of shut out the noise and go for it, and it doesn't seem hard at all. You literally do, like
Yeah.
you said about the Helena match, it
Yeah.
just sort of happens naturally. But then if you rely on it to happen naturally, obviously it isn't going to happen every time, is it?
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yeah, it's a weird one.
And then obviously with the Helena match itself, you realistically had probably the best showing against her that I think anyone's really seen anyone have over the last couple of years because you were utterly dominant right from the start. And after about a minute or so, obviously she escaped, started to come back into the match and everything. But as an outsider's perspective, it almost seemed as though you actually had more success because you took more risks, if that makes sense. Like I
Yeah.
think with Helena or with like Gordon Ryan, with anyone that's like a big name or a big figure, there's real tendency, I think, for people to sort of start slow and try and like figure their way out. But then, that sort of allows them to really control the match. Whereas, like I
Yeah.
said, with your match with Helena, you came out aggressive straight from the start and it really put her on the back foot. Do you think you'd be aiming to do the same thing in your rematch now or no?
I think that question is for the Sula that's the other version of me. I don't know what she's gonna do, to be honest. But yeah, you really like you you hit the nail on the head with that. Um, I think generally in my previous fights in general, whenever I hesitate, I tend to be on the back foot. And when I just go, like I've almost never experienced a fight where I think every fight is a bit different. Some fighters you have to hold them back because they just go crazy and they make mistakes that way. And I think it's important to understand what type of fighter you are. But I think for me, if I hold myself back, I usually tend to do worse. But if I just go and like let myself just be like full expression, that's generally when I absolutely just kill it. And I have the most fun as well because you know, so I think, yeah, I think I just want to go out there and I want to put on a show and like I said, I'll leave it up to that version of me to decide what she's gonna do. I don't know. I get like too nervous, so I have to like let her make the decision.
No, that makes sense. It definitely does. Like I said, especially if you do get into that flow state, you do shut out a lot of the external noise, like cornermen or people shouting at you. It does kind of go out of the window sometimes, and
Yeah,
it is difficult to predict. And
yeah.
then when you look beyond that match, obviously as well, I know you're not necessarily planning on anything else soon, but have you got your eye on any other events like ADCC Trials coming up or anything like that?
Yeah, so next year the plan is to focus on ADCC. I'm lucky because I can do 2 trials. So I'll do the European trials in February, and then depending on how that goes, I'll do the Australian ones as well in June. So I'm gonna plan those two. That's kind of the only competitions that I have on the horizon for the first part of the year. And then obviously there'll probably be some Polaris shows that I do in that as well. But my biggest goal at the moment is to like lighten my load in terms of how many comps I actually do. Because in the history of my entire career, like I said, I've just been competing all the time, and I think I got to the point last year where I didn't want to compete. I didn't want to train because I was like, this is too much. I'm not enjoying this. because I got burnt out. So now I'm like, all right, let me figure out what's actually impactful performances, what's actually important for me to do in this moment. And remember that like a year goes by pretty fast. So for example, I'm deciding not to do Euros in the gi and Worlds in the gi. That was a hard decision for me. But I know that I will be a happier version of myself and I'll be more focused and I'll be able to protect myself from injuries and perform better doing that. And then when I, after ADCC, can put the kimono back on and enjoy the gi season again in 2027. So I think it's yeah, making those decisions of like what's actually important and also impactful in order to move the needle forward in the way that you want it to. That's what I'm focusing on.
Yeah, so other than focusing on specific events, then, do you have any other ways that you've sort of been dealing with burnout or overcoming that over the last year or two then?
Yeah, one way I've been doing sports psychology, so that's been really important for me, just working with a professional. um, and then really just like making sure, because what I realized is I was doing a lot of stuff that I really like. So it didn't feel like I was stressed in the traditional way because I was like, but I love everything I do. I was teaching a lot, I was traveling a lot, I was competing a lot, I was doing seminars, I was doing all this stuff, spending time with my family, my friends. I was like, I love it. Like I'm having so much fun all the time. And then my therapist was like, yeah, but like it's still creating you stress. So even if it's not negative stress, it's still putting your body under stress. So you're still going to get overworked. It's just the same as if someone goes out and parties every weekend. They might have fun, but they're still, putting strain on their body. And I was like, oh, okay. So now I focus a little bit more. Like I teach a little bit less. I do things with a little bit more intention. So I'll try to have, again, more impact, less like scattered impact. I think before I was kind of just like throwing everything everywhere, catching everything all the time. And now I'm like, okay, a bit more specific about what I'm actually going to put my energy towards. But yeah, mainly just focusing on like having proper routines, going to the gym regularly, sleeping properly, regularly, being home as much as possible. Because obviously, when you're traveling all the time, it makes it very exhausting. So I am most comfortable and like calm when I'm home. So if I can be home a little bit more often, that's really important. Even if it just means like cutting out a couple of days off like a trip just to come home a little bit earlier. So yeah, just stuff like that, spending more time with family, doing more like things that bring my level down. But also, I think one thing that was really, really, really important this year was I took 3 months off competing since the fight with Helena, until Pan, 2 to 3 months. And that's the first time I've done that, like I think ever. So except for COVID, of course. And I enjoyed my summer. I went on a little holiday with my family and like did things that normally I would be like, how could I possibly do that? I won't train for 7 days. Like this is crazy. So, and then when I went to training, it was more just like to have fun, to learn rather than to like be in comp mode. So I think I'll prioritize that after big events, like just having periods of time where it's like, okay, after Worlds this year, I will take a little bit of time around Christmas to enjoy myself and have a nice family time. After ADCC next year, maybe I'll take a couple of months off, go on a little holiday or a staycation and just like enjoy those off seasons, which Jiu-Jitsu does not normally have. We have to create them ourselves.
No, I think you made a really good point then as well with the fact that a lot of jiu-jitsu competitors will be traveling all year round, not just for competitions, but seminar tours,
Yeah.
going to like teach at a training camp. And even though I'm sure that's fun, you know what I mean? Spending a week in Ibiza doing jiu-jitsu with
Yeah.
a bunch of new people, that's great. But it is still jet lag. It's still dealing with living in a hotel for a week.
Yeah.
It's all things that do sort of add up. And I think jiu-jitsu as a sport specifically is in that really difficult period where there's not a lot of money in competing. So you kind of have to do those things to
Yeah.
help survive as an athlete. But then it also sort of diminishes your performance on the mats, which is at the
Yeah.
end of the day, the ultimate goal, isn't it?
Yeah. Even just with those things now, like for example, I did a camp last weekend, the weekend before, and I historically when I do camps, I always get like super exhausted because I'm just like go, go, go. Um, and what I did this time was like, let me just try and keep my routine the same. So like I arrived on the third day and I did a gym workout on Friday, just as normal. I made sure I was hydrated because it was like, it's a lot of the time it's little things like when you're on holiday or on like a seminar or a camp, something like that, I tend to stop doing the things that naturally like keep me healthy. And then you lose energy. So I'll drink like 4 coffees in a day instead of 2. And I'll have like half a bottle of water instead of 4 liters. And I'll sleep 6 hours instead of 8. And all those things add up and make you exhausted because you're also talking to like hundreds of people and like doing all this stuff. So I focused on like drinking enough water, not having too much caffeine, going to bed on time, eating like proper food that was like actually nourishing me. And I felt amazing for the whole camp, even though I was just doing just as much as normal, but I was like taking time to really recover, which actually made a huge difference. And I think if you can do that as much as possible, like when you're traveling, keep your routine as strict as possible, that allows you to have more energy for what you're doing anyway.
Yeah, no, that makes sense for sure. Because I think that's a big thing for anyone. Like I said, is when you do travel to do a training camp or a seminar tour or whatever, it has got to be really easy to just slip out of habits because your whole world is upside down for a week or 2 weeks. So it's not as easy as coming home and going, oh, it's 10 o'clock. I'll have
Yeah.
mid-morning snack now. That's the right time. You could be teaching at that time instead, and then it's like
Yeah.
it's hard to actually fit everything in when you would normally,
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
And then obviously with the match with Helena upcoming, and then like you said, taking a little bit of a break after that. You mentioned Worlds as well. Is that Nogi Worlds at the end of the year you're doing?
Yes. Yeah. That's the plan. Yeah. So I'll have the match with Helena and then I'll have pretty much the whole of November just to recover, get back to training and then off to Worlds December.
And then you've got obviously ADCC Trials next year. I know you last year did Asia and Oceania and the European Trials as well.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find them different in terms of like because I think personally, when you travel around the world and compete against people, you tend to find that like specific gyms or specific areas have kind of like a style that comes together because they all cross train together. They all go to the same competition. So it does change the way people compete a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Did you find that sort of like competing in Europe and then going over to Australia to compete instead?
To be honest, I didn't really notice a huge difference in the girls that I was fighting. I fought Nadia in the final anyway, and she was going to be in the European trials, so we were both in both anyway. I think the style was pretty much the same. I definitely was able to impose my game better in the Australian trials, but I think that was more of a mindset thing than anything, because I definitely went into the European trials with like zero belief that I would actually be able to win. And then when I didn't do so badly after that, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I actually can win. So when I went into the Australian trials, I was kind of like, oh yeah, like it's not that far fetched for me to be able to do this. So I think it was more of a mindset thing than anything.
That's fair enough. That makes sense. And obviously, I think with ADCC as well, because it's such a unique rule set, you do need time under those conditions. Whereas,
Yeah.
you've done dozens of IBJJF comps over the years, so you kind of know that inside and out. Whereas ADCC has a lot of nuances, a lot of things that are different that sort of change the way you compete. So
Yeah, for sure.
for women, obviously, you only have the one trial to qualify for the second one or second time around in each location. But do you find, or have you ever thought about competing at the first one, where it's unfortunately there's no invite on the line, but you do get that sort of competition time and practice under ADCC rules?
Yeah, in 2023, I did that one. And that was really good for me just to like gain just the routine of like, okay, I'm going here and I'm going to do that. This year I decided not to because it coincided with my mum traveling here from Australia. And it was her last weekend here. And so, yeah, it was literally that decision. I was like, you know what? I said to myself that I'm taking this time off for the summer. So I'm just going to commit to that. Otherwise, I think I would have gone. But yeah, like I said, I think that at the point, like for the last trials before in 2023, I think it was really important because I'd never done an ADCC competition before. Whereas now I feel like I understand the rule set enough. I train the rule set a lot and I think about it a lot. So whether I do that or IBJJF is not going to make a huge difference in terms of like my overall performance. I'll still get to switch between them now is a lot easier now that I understand the rule set a lot better.
Yeah, and then that's something that sort of links back to what you mentioned earlier with not choosing to do the trials because obviously your mum was over. That's quite nice to hear that you've sort of struck that balance as well, where it's like that competition, although it'd be great experience, you're not going to get anything from it in terms of like,
Yeah.
attention or a ticket to ADCC kind of thing. So, maybe taking that week off and spending it with family is actually better for you in the
Yeah.
long run. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the thing we've got to make. Like, there's so many decisions to make, and like you have to do the other way around sometimes. Like, sometimes you'll be like, all right, yeah, I know that this is happening, but I'm gonna have to go and compete instead, and I'm gonna miss this family event. So, I think it's about deciding, like, picking your battles, deciding which ones are important, which ones are non-negotiables. Like, my sister's having a baby in December, and I'm going to Worlds. I'm like, sorry, love you, but like I'm out. So, I have to like pick my battles, but she understands. So hopefully that baby gets born once I'm back, but it's probably going to be while I'm away. But yeah, you got to pick and choose, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example as well of one of those family events that I'm sure everyone in the world would love to be there for, but ultimately it's something that, as harsh as it sounds, you can always meet the nephew or niece when you get back, can't you? Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you're not going to be the one in the delivery room, so it's not as if you're absolutely required. It's not necessarily a
Yeah.
non-negotiable. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
And then with the like eye on the future, like I say, is there anyone that you actually want to face specifically, other than obviously the rematch with Helena coming up?
You know who just popped into my mind is Brianna Ste-Marie. Um, and the reason I'd love to fight her is I feel like she's one of the athletes that I really resonate with on a mindset level. I think she's just nailed that like balance between like competition and play and like having fun out there. Um, and I think she's an amazing athlete. She's super well rounded and she's like really fun to fight. So, I mean, I've never fought her, but she looks really fun to fight. So, I would love to fight her because I think, like, yeah, I think we'd have a really cool match. And I think it would be a really good vibe as well. And I'm really inspired by her in that sense. So, yeah, I would love to fight her.
That's an interesting take as well. So when you look at, single matches, obviously in a tournament, you don't get any choice who you compete against, but
Yeah.
something like Polaris, do you sort of focus more on what you'll actually have more fun, or sorry, who you'll have more fun competing against rather than, the biggest name or the toughest test or whatever? Is it always just who you think you're going to enjoy competing against the most?
It's a good question. I think there's a balance. I think like I really like fighting people who I think will challenge me to like prepare better, if that makes sense. So with someone like Brianna, she's so well rounded that I feel like you have to really check all the boxes. So I think my prep for a fight like that would be really good. But because her energy is also so amazing, I think that my mindset going into it and in the camp and everything would be really light and fun. And that for me is like something that is important. And yes, I would love to, I'm happy to fight anyone as well. But like, yeah, that was just the name that popped into my head. I like her vibe. And she's
Fair
amazing at
enough.
jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, that does help as well, of course.
Yeah.
That's pretty much everything we've got time for at the moment, though, Sula. I mean, is there anything else that you want to say, or anyone you want to give a shout out to, or anything like that?
No, I think you covered all the bases. Yeah. Thank you.
No worries. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to me today, and have a nice day. All right.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Cheers. Take care.